Thank you for joining us on Winning at Selling podcast. I'm Professor Scott Plum of the Minnesota Sales Institute, and usually Bill Hellkamp of Reach Development Systems is with us. However, today he is on a very important assignment, and he wishes that he could be here today. What's the difference between working smarter versus harder? Do you want to be efficient or effective? How is value defined? How hard should you pressure the prospect to close the sale? Bill and I are pleased, lucky, blessed, however you want to express a strong, sincere appreciation to welcome Anthony Iannarino to our show today to discuss sales in today's marketplace and other great ideas on episode 468 of Winning at Selling podcast. I believe Anthony to be the most relevant and closely aligned to my sales philosophy. I have read his first book, The Only Sales Guide You'll Ever Need, followed by his other books on sales, including Eat Their Lunch and The Lost Art of Closing. You have described these books as a trilogy, and if you don't have a trilogy in your life, folks, I suggest that you pick these. Anthony, welcome to Winning at Selling podcast. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me on. And I appreciate that the kind words there.
Oh, it's very true, and it's well-deserved. I have followed you for many years. I've read your emails, your blog posts, and I just love your philosophy. And I know our listeners are really going to love your philosophy when it comes to sales, working with prospects. I want to talk about all kinds of subjects today, but let's start with discussing role models. I'm kind of curious, who has had the biggest impact on your sales career?
Probably Neil Rackham.
Yeah.
I mean, if I had to pick a person who actually helped me improve my results when I needed to, it would be Rackham's work. So the first thing that you're going to read is Spin Selling. I mean, because that book, it's the most selling book ever for McGraw-Hill, and it's still in hardcover.
Yeah.
It was printed in 1988. So
Wow.
This is a very long time ago. So that's how good and powerful that book is and still is.
Mm-hmm.
When I read that book, I didn't really concern myself too much with situation or problem questions. I didn't find those to be that interesting, but I was very interested in implications.
Yeah.
And
totally.
it changed the way that I was communicating with my clients, because I would start talking about the implications of decisions that they might or might not make.
Mm-hmm.
And it changed the nature of the conversation I was having. But
Right.
probably the biggest thing that book did for me was the 3 pages right before you get to the spin model.
Mm-hmm.
And during those 3 pages, starting on page 67, not that you should know that,
Right.
but if you wanted to go find it, you could find it.
I have it.
The thing that Rackham did was he started to take note of what closing meant in B2B sales. So we didn't really have a concept for this until Rackham gave us the advance.
Mm-hmm.
And those 3 pages where he describes that you have 1 of 2 outcomes. You either get an advance, so you're moving closer to a deal because you can't close a complex sale in one sitting, or you get a continuation, which means, Scott, love everything about you guys. You're wonderful. You're delightful. We'll get back to you in the future about it. And then you're like, well, they said all these nice things about me. It went really well.
I got one.
It didn't go very well, but you felt like it did. So what I learned from that book was never leave a meeting without a meeting. Never leave a meeting without a meeting. So whatever I had to do to get the next meeting, it changed the way that I was selling. And I didn't really have a structured process that I was working from at that time. The second book that Rackham wrote is called Major Account Sales Strategy.
Okay.
And that book is infinitely better than Spin Selling, in my opinion. And that book caused me to start recognizing the fact that it didn't matter that I had a $3 million business I was working for. I had these skills after reading that book and I guess you would call it the lens to look through, to start displacing my very large competitors who measured their revenue in billions. And
Wow.
I was smoking them in every contest. And it was Rackham's work that enabled that for me. So of all of my heroes, Rackham's one of them. Mahan Kalasa, the book that you have right there behind you. Let's Get Realer and It's Not Playing. Another one that's instrumental to being a great salesperson, no doubt about it. Matt Cannon's Consultative Selling, which is a very, very old book. I think
Mm,
the 7th edition was maybe 1985 or something like that, still a very long time ago.
mm-hmm.
That one is another one about how you think about selling. Like, you're
Wow.
supposed to
Yeah.
be helping the client improve their results.
Mm-hmm.
And when you focus on that instead of who we are, what our solution is, you just have a better conversation. So those
Mm-hmm.
have been all instrumental to me.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with you. The spin selling, I love the N in spin is numbers, and if you can really break down the cost of the implications, prospects are going to compare that cost against your price, and the difference is value. And that's how I break it down. But
Right.
he's also done the Challenger sale, the introduction to that, and I think he also did cracking the sales code for sales management book too.
Hmm.
Neil Rackham did so just an authority. If you haven't read Spin Selling, as Anthony said, it's one of the foundational books of sales. Anthony, I love the way that you talk about and defining value, and it's such a large topic. And I've heard you say it before that prospects define value, salespeople do not. And too often, salespeople say that we deliver value, but if the solution that the salesperson has does not stick to a problem that the prospect experiencing, there is no value. How can salespeople create more value for prospects?
Well, the first thing that you have to do is divorce yourself from the idea that your company has any value in the sales conversation at all. Like, you have to
Hmm.
get rid of that notion. And then the second thing that you have to get rid of is the notion that your solution is what creates value for them. It's only potential value for them after they buy.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're thinking about the sales conversation, where we get mixed up is the value that you create in that conversation is not the same value that they get after they buy from you. Okay, so this is a very important distinction. I feel like I have a tough time explaining this to people, but the only vehicle we have to create value for a client is the sales conversation. That's
Mm-hmm.
the only vehicle we have. Our company does nothing to support that value, and the solution does nothing to support that value, even though those things will be instrumental later. But right now, the way that you create value, and I'm gonna disappoint you by telling you that my fourth book has changed. It's not the leadership book because I'm
Oh,
writing another
no.
book in between. So the
Okay.
trilogy is now going to be a quadrilogy or a
Okay.
quadzilla
As
or
long as you
something
keep
like that.
writing.
Yeah, I wrote 2,700 words before I got on this call with you.
Wow.
So
Wow.
we're working on this book. But the thing that I would tell you, the way that you create value for your client is fairly complicated for us because we don't enable it. We don't enable these things yet.
Mm,
So the first thing that you have to do is you have to explain their world to them. So you have to spend time helping them understand where they are in space,
mhm,
why they have the struggles that they have, and what this means for them. So you have to start at this place where I am the one that's sense making for you. Like, I'm going to teach you how to think about your business because I'm doing this every day with hundreds, thousands of clients in my
mhm,
company. You're doing it for one company. So my experience and my knowledge is greater than yours
mhm,
because I do it every day and you buy it occasionally. So that's part of this. And then the next thing is if you think about what do we really do? What we really do is enable good decisions that lead to better results. So
yeah,
explaining to someone the factors that they need to consider, how to weigh those factors, what they should explore, what they should not explore, what they should avoid, what they should think deeply about doing, and then talking to them about the changes that they actually need to make on their side. That's a
mhm,
different conversation than we're used to having.
mhm,
We're used to why us, why our solution.
right,
And this is sort of a legacy approach, what I'm calling legacy approach.
mhm,
So, Sandler's 53 years old. That was a
right,
different
right,
time. So
yeah,
there was a different type of information disparity. So you needed a salesperson in 1967 to tell you about products and solutions in their
mhm,
company, because
mhm,
where were you going to get the information? Like,
right,
there was nowhere to get it. So that's
mhm,
not going to work. So then we get to solution selling and we find a problem and we insert the solution and problem solved. We help them move it forward. Well, now the problem is I don't understand the world that I live in. It's complex. And when you
mhm,
think about how disruptive technology's been, your business model's under threat.
mm,
So, first, it's complex. And if you think about this, and I may be the only one that believes this, and I certainly believe it because it occurred to me every every single boom and bust cycle we've had since 2000 has been man-made.
Mm.
So the dot-com bubble was not a regular boom and bust cycle. That's 54 months, which it's always been throughout history.
Wow.
And then after that, you got the 2008 recession.
Mm-hmm.
That was man-made. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we did that. And now 2000, you get a pandemic, not man-made,
Right.
but certainly not a normal boom and bust cycle. So it's a complex environment that we live in. And if you were the last guy to buy a taxi medallion in New York City for $1
Right.
million, you're really, really feeling a great amount of regret right now
Yeah.
that Uber's
Jeez.
there.
Oh, my.
So it's a tough place for us to start making decisions. And so when you understand that part of what you're trying to do is help the client understand their world, understand the decisions that they're making, then what I would tell you is a large part of this is what I would call a facilitated needs based buyer's journey. So
Mm.
there's no linear process anymore. So those
Right.
slides that we have that say target, qualify, discovery, solution, design, presentation, proposal, negotiation, acquisition, one doesn't go in that order anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And then the buyer's journey that you see that starts with awareness and then it ends with a purchase, that's not true anymore either.
Yeah.
So now we're in this place where agility is what's necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have to figure out, like, how do I facilitate the buyer's journey when they don't even know who's going to be in the room? They don't know what decision they need to make. Like, it's a different environment for us. So you have to be the sense maker, the person that comes in and helps them understand their world, understand the decision, and gain the certainty by going through some sort of process that allows them to get that certainty that they can change and improve their results. So it's a very different way. So the thing I'll say about value is it's pretty simple. Level one means you have a good product.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a great product and you decide that that's the value that you're creating, you're immediately commoditized. Like that's
Exactly.
it. Like there's
So true.
nothing for you to talk about.
So true.
So the second thing is if it's your experience, like we have really good service and good support, table
Mm-hmm.
stakes, you're
Mm-hmm.
immediately commoditized. Everybody can do that.
Yep.
So nothing there. Level three would be solution selling. And that would be like, I can get you a tangible result that you're not getting right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's good. All three of these are necessary, by the way. Like none of them you can say like, well, I could just be really strategic and I don't need these other things. You have to deliver it. So you need all of these.
Right.
But the fourth level of value is the strategic value. And that's where
Mm-hmm.
we stop talking about solutions. I keep saying solutions, Scott, because it's just the word that we've used for
Of
so
course.
long.
Mm-hmm.
But really what it is, it's outcomes. And
Right.
and there's a lot of ways to get to outcomes, but really what we're focused on now, the highest level of value would be strategic outcomes. So how do we help them get what they want? And I'll try to give you an example here for the audience so that they understand this. If I'm in the business of printing, you might ask me to print something, fold it in thirds, stick it in an envelope, and mail it to somebody whose address we give you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's good. That's level three. And if I make that easy for you and the product's good and the service is good, you got a pretty good strong value proposition there. But that's not what somebody's buying. They're when they buy this, what they're buying is customer acquisition. So they
Mm-hmm.
want somebody to open that, go to the computer and fill out an application for a credit card. So the thing that we're trying to enable is the credit card application, not the mail.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the part where when you can move past 3 to 4, you're creating a greater level of value because you're actually giving the client what they want. And in the first book, the red book behind you,
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
quoted Theodore Levitt from Harvard, who said, "People don't buy drills; they buy quarter-inch holes."
Exactly.
And when you start to recognize that the color yellow on the drill isn't really exciting to people
Mm-hmm.
because they're really excited about the hole. So
Right. Right. There's a little brand loyalty with the yellow or the red or the blue. I mean,
yeah,
it's a little different. But one of my good friends, Tom Wininger, and he's passed. He always said that the application or the value is defined in the application of the solution.
right.
And you're really selling outcomes, like you said. And it's not the solution, it's what the solution will do for you. It's not in the specs or the specifications, it's in the application. And once you apply the solution, you get the value during the application.
And we've known this for a very long time,
Yeah.
but we still train and teach and enable that the solution and look, so there's two things that happen in onboarding when you go and you get a new job in sales. The marketing people will tell you you have to tell our story. You have
Right.
to tell our
Oh,
story.
of course. We're
Everybody
so
loves our
proud of our
story.
story. Yeah.
And people are amazed by this story. They love it, and they don't. They don't
Right.
really care.
Yeah.
I've been telling people you should take your first date slides, go out into your backyard, build a little fire, burn
Yeah.
them, take the ashes, and bury them in the four corners of your yard. Like
Right.
you don't need those anymore.
Yeah.
And then the product people will come along behind them and say, like, you have to explain the value of the solution. Everybody wants to
Hmm.
know about the features and the benefits
Of
and how this
course.
works. And it's just not the right conversation at the beginning of this. So I mean, all of those things matter. Everything
Yeah. Yeah.
matters, but they don't matter when you're in the sales conversation and you're trying to help somebody make a decision about how they get the better results. That's my view.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you're talking about behavior when it comes
Yeah.
to selling value and having those conversations with prospects. And in your first book, the only sales guide you'll ever need, you have a mindset section, and beliefs and mindset are so important. Can you tell us about what are supportive beliefs? What is a positive mindset? What is the drawback of not having it, and what is the benefit of having a good mindset?
I started that book with the idea that I was writing a success book for B2B salespeople. What it really was is it's a competency model, and
Hmm.
it might be the first B2B competency model that anybody's ever printed in a book like that. But you had to disguise it as a sales book and in a success oriented book for people to recognize the competency model. Because you can't have a book, Scott, called like a competency model for B2B
No,
salespeople. Like
no,
nobody will buy that book.
exactly,
That's not
exactly.
going to happen. So it starts with discipline. And I mean, literally, the first publisher that asked for the book hated it because it had discipline in it.
Mm,
And he said, everybody hates discipline. I'm like, well,
yeah,
it's necessary for success. The second
exactly.
thing he hated was caring.
Right.
And what I was trying to describe was an other orientation that allows you to be an effective salesperson and create value for other people.
Hmm.
And he didn't like that either. We
Right.
decided not to publish a book together, as you might imagine.
Right. Good.
We didn't feel like we were going to be good partners in this. But the mindset really matters. And if you start to understand, my job is to serve the client in creating value for them. So that means I need to exercise my initiative, my resourcefulness, my persistence, my communication skills, my ability to recognize where they are in this journey and be able to help them. And then I need to activate all the skills that we can teach the skills, how
Exactly.
to gain commitments, how to get that first meeting, how to create opportunities. We know how to do those things, but it's mostly enabled, Scott, and you know this because you asked the question.
Yeah.
You know this because this is what allows you to do those things is the mindset that you bring to them. And
Hmm.
so if you believe my company is the value, my solution is the value, you're starting with a mindset that is not, I'm going to say, adequate for the reality of selling right now today.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to say something that's a tiny bit of arrogance, so forgive me. I'm right now,
Yep.
but in the future I will be wrong, like solution selling is wrong now. Like it's still got a lot
Oh,
of truth in it, but now it needs to be enabled in a different way. That's just a legacy approach because it was what was effective for such a long period of time. I mean, that's what we did when we left like the legacy approach and then went to legacy, what I'll call legacy solution now. And now we're enabling a different kind of a conversation. And one of the things that I like to talk to Brent Adamson about is that like this wasn't something that they created.
hmm
It wasn't a novelty that they picked up. It was something that came out of the research. And the research was that the salespeople who were experiencing great results were the ones that were challenging the client. That's the word
hmm
that they used it.
Yep.
I wouldn't use the word.
Right.
I wouldn't use that word in the maybe the same way that some people interpret that word.
Hmm.
What I would say is, if you wanted to think about the challenge in the most helpful way, is um, your client has their own experience. They have their own knowledge. They have
Right.
their own business challenges and the things that they know. And so what you're really challenging is the set of assumptions that no longer serve them.
Mm.
So you're not really challenging the client. But in book number 4 for me, I'm writing like
Hmm.
you're prosecuting the false assumptions.
Right.
So you're not prosecuting the client for making bad decisions.
Hmm.
when they made those decisions, and a lot of times the decisions were right for the time, kind of like our approaches,
Right.
they were right for the time. So when people criticize, old approaches, like you can't really criticize those approaches because they evolved as what buyers needed from salespeople. And
Hmm.
now they need better help understanding the world that they live in and the
Hmm.
decision that they're being asked to make and how to make those decisions. And more, they need something like a facilitated, uh, needs based buyer's journey. They need you to recognize
Hmm.
what help they need and give them that help. So these are things that we haven't really started enabling yet.
Right.
And this is why when you start talking about this, people are a little bit lost. They can be a little bit confused because of what we know, and
Hmm.
you know it the same way that I know it.
Hmm.
When I talk about legacy approaches and their ineffectiveness, I practiced those approaches.
Hmm.
So like just I'm
Right.
not throwing the stone. I'm the one who actually practiced those things. So when you talk about the old approaches and people criticize them, what you have to understand is like that's not a fair assumption.
Hmm.
It is. If you lived in 1967, you would have been selling as was necessary in that time.
Exactly.
And now in 2021, what's required is different. And what I was saying about that, I think earlier was, I'm right now. I feel like I'm
Hmm.
right. What I'm
Hmm.
saying is right. In some point in the future, it's not going to be right anymore. It's
Right.
going to be a legacy approach where people go, buyers are sick of all this insight.
Yeah.
They're just going to tell you, like, Scott, why don't you just pitch me what you want to sell me? Like, why do you have to
Hmm.
keep giving me all these insights? I've been
Right.
getting insights for 20 years now. And so then that will shift, right?
Yeah. I've always said, and I've said this recently, my sales advice needs to have an expiration date on it.
Yeah.
When I see somebody and they said, "Oh, guys, my first class, my first experience with you was back in 2004," and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, what do I need to walk back from today?" Because the market's different today than it was in 2004.
No doubt.
And you've used the term help, and some of our listeners know that I have a real problem with the word help. I love work with. I think
Mhm.
salespeople should work with prospects, because when we work with somebody, we have a common goal and a common commitment to get there. And when I take a step, they take a step. They take a step, I take a step. And when we help somebody, it's like, we're up here, they're down here, and we're going to save them. We're going to rescue them. And we know that prospects hate losing control, and they hate it when salespeople are being assumptive. So the best way to maintain control is to not share information. And then how can a salesperson really work with somebody to solve a challenge or a problem now or in the future? Is we need information in order to do that. And by helping somebody, it's almost enabling them to say you can't do it. And I don't think it's a healthy relationship. But Frank
Well,
Cespedes,
I describe the relationship in a far, I'm going to say a much different way than you do.
yeah,
So
and Frank Cespedes corrected me on it. He said, "Well, Scott, it's more of a facilitation, like you described, Anthony. You
yeah,
said, we're
facilitation
working
is
with
one
them."
way, but the
Yeah.
way that I would say is, I'm one up in the relationship, and they are one down in the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not like I'm superior to them as a
Right.
human being. It's nothing to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that one of us has experience that the other one lacks.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Right.
who do you want to facilitate your buyer's journey? Somebody that's always on the mountain, helping people find their way to the top, whether it's the long way around or the straight path, depending on
Mm-hmm.
where you find them.
Mm-hmm.
Or does the person who never makes this decision, should they be the one leading? And so you have to say, I have to facilitate it because I know the path up the mountain, and I know, like, if these people go up this path, they're dead. Like, they're
Mm-hmm.
not going to make it. It's too steep for them. They don't have the skills, they don't have the
Yeah.
ability to do it. But if I take them the long way around and they spend more time on it, then they're going to be able to get this. And so
Right.
this is a sort of, a very high level pattern recognition skill. Like, what do they need from me?
Mm-hmm.
What do I have to give them right now so that they can see what I can see, because they can't see it right now,
Mm-hmm.
but I see it. And
Right.
and I would just say, like, think about somebody who sells ERP.
Mm-hmm.
So they sell ERP. How often does the buyer buy that? Like, they hope they
Well,
buy it
yeah,
once in their
once.
life,
Yeah.
right? They hope
Exactly.
it's once. If it's
Right.
twice,
Oh,
they're miserable,
they
right?
made
They're
a mistake.
miserable.
Yep.
That's a open heart surgery, a brain surgery, a
Right.
colonoscopy, and a root canal.
Yeah.
Like, it's all at the same time. Like, that's too many
Exactly.
things. So they
Exactly.
they they don't enjoy that. but they don't make the decision frequently enough to have a good understanding of the decision. So I have to be the one that does that because I
Hmm.
have better experience than they do. So the word help, I mean, and I understand your aversion to that because it's a little bit hard to define. So I
Hmm.
like create value. I like to
Yeah.
say create value. So you're missing something, I'm going to do this, and when you're not missing that anymore, and the way that I think about this concept of one up, which will be a book, by the way,
Okay.
is that I have to enable them to be one up as it pertains to their results. So
Hmm.
the only way that I can get them one up is start closing all these gaps that they have,
Hmm.
and the more gaps that you can close for them, the more you become the trusted advisor. And like, well, I'm not going to make a
Hmm.
decision without Scott because
Hmm.
Scott's going to help me understand the decision that I'm making in the world that I'm making it in and
Hmm.
how to be successful at it.
Right.
And
Right.
and then they're better prepared to be one up inside their own organization as they lead that change.
Yeah. So the listeners, the professor here is getting schooled by the authorities in sales. I'm grateful for it, Anthony. So Frank Cespedes really gave me a different perspective. You gave me a different perspective, and I love that relevance to how do we interact with our prospects to be, as like you said, a trusted advisor. In your book, Eat Their Lunch, you talked about collaborating, and if you can't take on difficult conversations and manage conflict, you're not going to be able to build that trust and that trusted advisor with prospects. I'm curious on inspiration. You've shared that you get up at 4:30 in the morning, you write for an hour, and then you work out. I mean, if that's where do you get your inspiration? Today you wrote 2,700 words before we started the recording, and it's 6 a.m. Central Time here when we started. So I mean, that's an early start to the day. How do you get inspired to do that?
I go with there's a quadriplegic painter named Chuck Close,
Okay.
and he paints, with his mouth and with his
Mm,
toes, and
mm,
he does really incredible work. You should look him up. But I go with
yeah.
Chuck Close's quote because it's the best. Inspiration is for amateurs.
Okay.
Professionals just show up and do the work like
Wow.
that, and
That's so
and that's
good.
it. So if you're a professional, like, you don't look for inspiration, you just look for discipline. Like, I'm
Mm,
just gonna get up and do the work. So,
mm-hmm.
now where do I find the ideas?
Okay.
All over the place. So,
Yeah.
if you're interacting with salespeople and sales managers and sales organizations,
Hmm.
as you well know, there's
Yeah.
no end of things for you
So true.
to start to think about. How do I convey uh it's not knowledge transfer for us, like for what you do and what I do. It's not so
Hmm.
much knowledge transfer, it's competency transfer. Like, I'm
Yeah.
trying
Yeah.
to take a very high level competency and impart it to another human being, and that's a very difficult thing to do. So you can't run out of things to do as it pertains to writing and trying to explain it, because you'll explain it perfectly. I mean,
Hmm.
it will feel like it was perfect for you, right? And the other
Right.
person's like, "Scott, I don't get it." And
Yeah.
you're like, "Wow, okay, let me try another way." And
Hmm.
and then the fifth way, you're like, "Wow, they get it now."
Yeah.
And so you have a lot of opportunities to try to figure out how best to convey the competency.
Yeah. And you and I will show up and we will deliver. How do sales managers inspire or lead their team when their sales team is not showing up? I've worked
Yeah.
with sales teams, and I'm there and I deliver a session and I follow up with another session, and the salespeople have not applied anything that I've covered before. And the sales management is not there to reinforce it and hold them accountable, and to have them incorporate it into their behavior and their routine. How do sales managers inspire teams?
I wouldn't look for inspiration. Again, I would look for
Mm,
disciplines. And I
mm,
would say this is a couple things that a manager listening to this should know. You're going to determine the result of your sales force by the standards that you have.
mm-hmm,
So if you have low standards or no standards,
mm-hmm,
or you will let the lowest common denominator determine the standards, then you're not going to get the best result from human beings. And Scott, you will remember at some point an individual that recognized that you were not doing what you were capable of doing. Now, it
mm-hmm.
could have been
True.
a teacher, a preacher, a
Mm-hmm,
coach, a parent,
mm-hmm,
but somebody looked at you and said, "Scott, like, you are not doing what you need to do." And
Hmm.
they weren't saying that to you in a harsh way. They were saying it to you in a way like, you can be more than you are right now.
Right.
And I need you to raise your own personal standard for what you deliver because
Hmm.
you're capable of a lot more. And that's what makes you a great leader.
Hmm.
The great leader is never somebody that's like, Scott, you know what? I've noticed that you're a mediocre talent. And what I'm going to do is try to ignore you. I won't bother you very much. You don't bother me very much. And we'll both
Hmm.
pretend like everything's just fine. That's what a lot of managers do, is they sort of just let people just exist at whatever plane they're already on.
Right. Right.
And what you have to do is say, like, I'm raising the standard. So the
Hmm.
standard is much higher.
Hmm.
And in the businesses that I've personally run, and a number of family businesses, I just made the standard that you have to be a better salesperson than me, and
Hmm.
I'm pretty good.
Hmm.
And, and they ended up being better than me, and they
Yeah.
ended up being better than me in different ways than I would have expected. But I expected them to create so much value that they could win a deal. And literally at some point I had a revolt where people said, like, you can't go on calls with us anymore. Like, yeah, we don't need you. We don't. And I'm like,
Right.
yeah, but I close the big deals. And they're like, You don't close the big deals. We don't need you
Right.
to close big deals."
Yeah.
I had
Right.
a little mutiny. And it turns out that they were right. And then my
Yeah.
life got even easier because
Right.
they had that competency. The second thing is, as soon as you give up accountability, Scott, the game is over.
Oh, so
So if
true.
if there's no consequences for not taking action on what Scott taught you, and
Hmm.
if you're not going to sit down and say, all of us are getting in a room together on Friday at 11 o'clock to talk about how you executed what Scott taught you. What
Hmm.
did you learn from it? What worked? What didn't work? What do we need to adjust for the way that we sell? Then they're not going to get the transformation. So
Hmm.
one of the things that we insist on is we train managers before we train salespeople.
Mm, good. That's a great directive. I always say when somebody says to me, "You've got potential," I feel insulted, and it's
I'm perfect
because,
just the way I am.
well, no, I'm insulted because they see greatness in me that I don't see in myself,
Yeah.
and they say you can do much better than what you're doing right now. I believe in you more than you believe in yourself, and that's a confidence issue that a
Yeah.
salesperson has,
Oh yeah.
and they need to be able to have more confident that they do know more than they think that they do.
Oh yeah. Well, they certainly know more than the client,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
again, it's a matter of, if you sell the same thing every day, like, your experience is stacking up so fast
Hmm.
compared to the buyer who's buying
Right,
it occasionally.
right.
And if they've bought it a whole bunch of times, um, a lot of those assumptions are still false. And so you still have to
Mhm,
go back and start correcting that so that they don't make the same mistakes that they've made that causes them to have to keep rebuying.
mhm. You've talked a little bit about the difference between being liked and how that can be a weakness, and I always say that people need to move past being liked to earning somebody's respect. What are you seeing in salespeople when they have that high need for approval?
Yeah. Uh, it's the difference between being likable,
Mhm.
which is very helpful,
It is.
and needing to be liked, which is
Mhm.
very detrimental. and
Yeah,
and and this is part of what, we'll go back to the Challenger sale, because that's a book that a lot of people are aware of.
very much.
But when you think about what they would call a relationship salesperson, which
Mhm.
I disagree completely with the definition, the
Mhm.
way that they're using it. I would call it a conflict averse order taker. That's what
Good.
I would call
Well
that person.
said.
Yeah,
So
so
true.
I would not call it a relationship. The relationship is what allows you to, if you want to use their vernacular, that it allows you to challenge the client. So
Mhm.
the fact that you have a good relationship makes it a lot easier. Like, if I have to say, Scott, your baby's really ugly,
Yeah.
like, it's a hideous baby,
Right.
and I'll put a pink bow on it if you want to, but you and I are both still going to be staring at an ugly baby with a pink
Yeah.
bow. Like, that
Yeah.
that doesn't change anything to do with your results right now.
Mm.
You hope you have a good relationship, or that you're likable. Like, you hope you
Mhm.
have fast rapport skills if you want to do that. But it is part of the relationship is value creation. And
Mhm.
so value creation means we're not allowed to avoid the difficult conversations. We're not allowed to. We have to engage in the conflict that's necessary for the client to understand their world and to make the right decision, even if they want to hang on to their assumptions.
Mhm.
So I came out of temporary staffing. Two primary assumptions: labor is cheap, labor is abundant.
Mhm.
Both wrong.
Right.
Both wrong.
Right.
And it caused a set of behaviors that caused people not to get the results that they wanted. So I had to unwind those assumptions and provide them with a new view of reality so that they could understand the context in which they were making the decision. Labor is scarce and it's expensive.
Hmm.
Now your behaviors have to change. So you have a brand new story that you have to recognize before you can do that. So I think that if you're conflict averse and you're not willing to get a little bit of, I don't call it positive friction, okay? So
Hmm.
there's negative friction and there's positive friction.
Hmm. Hmm.
A straight conflict is just all negative conflict.
Right. Right.
When you're actually trying to facilitate better results, I didn't use the word help because I didn't want to offend you
Oh,
again.
no, thank you. No, I
Uh,
appreciate that.
but
No,
the
no offense.
it it's the positive friction.
Yeah.
Like, this is where we are, and these are the facts that say that this is true, and these are the things that other people have already started doing that are producing better results. And whatever you have to do to help somebody see that what they believe is no longer true,
Hmm.
and it's what's an obstacle preventing them from getting those results that they want. So that's part of it. So I think if you're conflict averse, it's really hard. And I have a lot of friends. Mike Weinberg's one of them. Like, you
Yeah.
don't get. I mean, you might get a tap on the head for your compliance,
Hmm.
yeah, but you're not going to win the deal. Like,
Hmm.
being compliant isn't the path.
Right.
Value creation is the path, and that means having the conversations necessary to get the results in the end.
Hmm. I love how you talk about the number one source of success and what it takes to be successful. I think a lot of people are searching for the silver bullet of how do I become successful? How do I get rich quick? Talk about what is the number one source of success.
Well, for I think there's some differences for different folks, but
Mm-hmm.
the source of success is really hunger. I mean,
Hmm.
I find it
Yeah.
just to be hungry, and the easiest way to hire, and so when you say, like, well, how do you inspire and motivate a team? Hire people that are already motivated. Like,
Right. Right.
you have people who already are hungry. It's
Yeah.
just easier. I mean, the number one factor is hunger. Those are the people that will turn themselves inside out.
Hmm.
So do you know Brandon from Seamless AI?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You've seen his house, you've seen his
I,
cars, you've seen
I
him flying in a
haven't, but
private jet,
yeah.
right? Okay.
Right. Okay.
I invested in Seamless not because I believed in the product, but because I believed that he was hungry enough that something was gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I you bet on the jockey, not the horse. So
Right.
so so that's how it works. So if you're thinking about this, and you have to decide what you want, and I would tell you, Scott, a lot of people don't know what they want.
So true.
They don't know, and so you have to maybe get a cabin, someplace where you're in the woods and sit down and just think about, like, what do I want? This thing goes real fast.
Hmm.
You still have hair, but it's
Yeah.
gray.
Yeah. Yeah.
I still have
It's
hair, not much, but it's on my face and not on my head. It's gray.
yeah.
That happens really fast, doesn't it?
It does
Yeah, and
overnight
so
almost.
if you're not intentional about what you want, you can go a long time, and not do the right things, and then discover later on that you gave up decades.
Right.
And if you decide that you want something, that's what creates the hunger. Like, I want something that I don't have,
Mm-hmm.
and that generally works.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a difference between being hungry and being starving, and
Right.
starving is desperate, and those
Yeah.
those folks are trouble when they're starving,
No
and
doubt about it.
they'll say anything to get a job or to make a sale, and there's it's just a scary situation. Um, you've talked a little bit about technology and how technology coming into sales was going to make sales so much easier. It was going to shorten everything. It was going to make it all, and it hasn't had that effect, has it?
No. And it can't, and I've not read Justin Michael's new book, Tech Powered
Haven't
Sales with
either.
Tony Hughes. Both of those guys I know and like. But I have a trouble with, like, so you can automate things.
Hmm.
So you can use technology. I'm not anti-technology. I
Hmm.
use a
Right.
lot of it. Um, but the truth of the matter is, the variable is the sales conversation.
Hmm.
So the variable is value creation. The variables, how much you're able to facilitate this understanding of the world and the decision, that's not enabled by technology. So that's the thing that I'm mostly concerned about, is the 6 inches between your ears. Like,
Right.
that technology is the technology that I'm mostly focused on.
Mhm.
And I think that there's a huge misunderstanding of the difference between efficiency and effectiveness.
So true.
And so I think you should focus on effectiveness first,
Hmm.
and don't worry so much about efficiency. So when people say like we want to increase the velocity of our sales process, it's like why? Because we'd
Yeah.
like to win more deals faster. Well, why do you think that's an efficiency problem?
Hmm.
Why do you not recognize that that's an effectiveness problem that's solved by something like the lost art of closing, like understanding the commitments that they need to make
Hmm.
and enabling those conversations for them so they can actually get to the point where they can buy. So
Yeah.
you think it's an efficiency problem and you want to go faster as the result of that. You're like, I need to go faster. No, you need to go slower because
Hmm.
if you slow down and help them have the whole conversation, then they can open the gate for you and go to the next stage. But when you decide I'm going to try to go faster by skipping things or not spending much time on this thing, or the client, you let the client lead.
Right.
And I had an argument with a friend on LinkedIn just about the statement that sellers should sell the way buyers want to buy. Well, then send them a quote, an
Right.
email, like
Yeah.
because that's what they want to do.
Yep.
That's not what they need to do. You should sell the way that buyers need to buy. And that
Hmm.
means they need to get an education about how to make that decision and to ensure that they get the results. The reason that they're uncertain is in large part because we don't spend enough time helping them think these things through.
Hmm. Right. Right. Exactly. This has been very informational, Anthony. I'm really grateful for you spending the time with our listeners. I've learned a lot. I'm listening to this more than once, and the essence of everything that you really talked about is really creating value. And once you create value, then you can claim value. And when
Right.
you've done a great job of creating value, and you've done a great job of qualifying your prospects, you can use that to leverage your solution towards their goal and the advantages in a competitive marketplace. And when you talk about the four levels, I mean, that's right out of your book, eat their lunch. And I really encourage everyone to get all three books that are on the market right now that Anthony has put out. It's a tremendous trilogy. It's a foundation of sales. It's relevant in today's marketplace, and you're going to find that it is going to stay relevant in today's marketplace. So, Anthony, any final words that you want to share? How can people get a hold of you, et cetera?
Well, the easiest place to find me is thesalesblog.com. And I publish there every day, even though we're weeks behind our publishing schedule right now. But
Mm,
I still write every single day, and
hmm.
we're slower at editing and graphics right now, but we'll catch up eventually. That's the best place. Or LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a good
Right.
place
Yeah.
as well.
So, thanks for being with us, Anthony.
Thanks for having me.
This segment has been brought to you by the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program, presented by your host of Winning at Selling podcast. Every professional athlete has a coach, someone to assist and advise. Tiger Woods had 4 swing coaches so that he could stay at the top of his game. What would you like to improve or overcome in the next year? Perhaps as a salesperson, you want to be more productive with your prospecting, overcoming objections, or delivering more effective presentations. As a sales manager, you want to create a spark within your sales team with a new message, a refreshed approach to starting new conversations with prospects, or you are looking for market-ready strategies to increase revenue and shorten the sales cycle with your existing team. Or as a business leader, you want to transform the sales culture and your value proposition for the new marketplace. Whatever your reason, this is the perfect time to engage with an experienced sales coach. That is why your hosts of Winning at Selling podcast, Professor Scott Plum and Bill Hellkamp, have developed the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Now you can receive personal coaching from the same sales professionals you enjoy on this podcast. It all starts with a discussion to give us insights into your specific goals, challenges, needs, and motivation. Go to winningatselling.com to contact Bill or Scott about the Jumpstart Sales Coaching Program. Do you believe you deserve better results? Now is the time to invest in yourself, your people, and your customers, and invest in your future. The golden nugget today is a quote that I've taken out of one of Anthony's books, and it's something that I think is very relevant. Again, I really stress the importance of relevance in today's marketplace. And it is, you cannot be consultative and a trusted advisor if you are not willing to deal with conflict over the process of serving your prospective client. It's so important. And I believe, as Anthony said earlier, you have to be able to engage in positive inspiration, positive conflict, and Conflict is a byproduct of two people in the pursuit of truth. And when you engage in conflict, you're engaging in two people in the pursuit of truth. Everything that we talked about today is at the website, winningatselling.com. All the information about the show notes, link to Anthony's blog, and I'm going to include a link to his author page on Amazon too. So you can get all 3 books with one click. Next week, Bill and I will be covering Chapter 6 of Let's Get Real or Let's Not Play, Winning the Art of Enabling Decisions from page 144 for the rest of Chapter 6. And the topic is going to be on decision-making, the process, and joyful selling. Thanks for being with us today.